When you join the United States Army, there's certain things that you have to basically give up. In this video, I'm going to be talking about things you have to give up when it comes to privacy. What's up, my friends? Welcome to an all-new video. I'm U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and if you're not familiar with my channel, well, I'd like to educate you about things that are related to the Army, and if that's the kind of things that you want to know about, well, maybe we should think about clicking on that subscribe button, even clicking on that bell, so you get alerts as soon as new videos go live, to include the live streams, and become a part of that awesome notification platoon. So let's talk about what kind of things related to privacy you have to give up when you join the United States Army. Now, some of these things may be self-explanatory to you. Maybe they're common sense things. Maybe you already know about these things. The key thing and the key idea behind this video is to give you a little bit of a heads up. They're not necessarily maybe deal breakers for most people. Maybe for some people it might be, but they're things that maybe you knew about or didn't know about, things you didn't expect, and it gives you a little bit of heads up so that when you do join the Army, or maybe you're just curious about the topic in general, and you know that, hey, if I join the Army, these are certain things that I know that I'm gonna have to give up, certain things to expect when it comes to privacy in the United States Army. Now, a lot of this probably pertains to the military in general, but as I've said before in other videos, I was US Army, so I try to keep it Army related, but a lot of this stuff probably does pertain to like the Marines or the Air Force or whatever the case is. Now, when you go to basic training, you're probably expected you're gonna have to give up a lot of things as far as privacy. Some of those things are pretty common. Some of them are showers, right? You probably have pretty open showers usually in basic training. You're not gonna get nice little individual one-on-one bathrooms and individual showers or anything. Some basic trainings, I have heard stories where they've gotten a little bit better privacy, but most commonly a lot of those showers are not very kind of designed for privacy, I guess. My basic training, that was a long time ago, that was back in 1999 when I did basic training, but mine was a big, huge open area with a bunch of shower heads all over the place. Most of them have gotten a little bit better than that, but still not a lot better. Now, commonly, a lot of them have maybe like a little concrete barrier that's maybe like waist high, and there's a bunch of shower heads, so some of them have that. Some of them may be pretty cool and have maybe like a shower curtain in a big room with a bunch of showers, but then you're probably still having to kind of come out of that shower naked, and other people are probably gonna see you naked, so if you're really shy, you kind of have to just try to adapt to that. So when it comes to taking showers, you're probably gonna lose a lot of privacy there, depending on the basic training location and how they have their shower set up. A lot of them are fairly open. Some of them may have these cool shower curtains, but you probably still have to go out of that shower curtain to go get dressed or dry off or whatever the case is, and someone might see you when you're coming out of those showers. Also, along with that in basic training is probably getting dressed. Usually you're in either a big, huge bay with a bunch of soldiers, and when you're changing out of your physical fitness uniform, maybe to get into your, combat uniform for training for the day, you're probably in this large open area where other people are getting dressed too, so they're gonna probably see you getting dressed. Maybe you're lucky enough that you have some of those ones that have maybe like 4 or 5 people inside of a smaller room kind of area. Well, then maybe it's less people that could potentially see you getting dressed, but definitely if you're one of those people that, like in gym class back in high school, you were afraid to get dressed in the locker room because you didn't want all the other people seeing you getting dressed. Well, be aware that's probably still gonna be a thing when you're in basic training, and even probably AIT. So a lot of that might have already been common sense, maybe things you already expected from basic training or AIT, but it still continues even when you get to your duty stations. Especially for soldiers that live in the barracks. Well, some of your privacy may be invaded as far as there's gonna be people coming into your room. They're gonna wanna go through your room, see how you're living. Barracks inspections is a pretty common thing for soldiers living in the barracks. You have NCOs that want to come check on your well-being, making sure that you're not living dirty, that you're living healthy, you're not having things you're not supposed to have in the barracks, those kind of things. Now, they're not supposed to happen too often because that can reduce morale in the barracks, but they usually have some kind of set standard as far as maybe once a week or maybe every other week or whatever. Some may still say screw it and do it every other day or every day or whatever the case is, but typically a lot of units try to reduce the amount of times that NCOs and leadership are coming into the barracks because that can reduce morale and kind of take away too much privacy, but there is still should be some checks going on at some point in time where leadership should be coming through single soldiers barracks rooms to make sure that they're not having things that they're not supposed to have, and they're living reasonably and not just living in filth and mold growing all over the place. So they're gonna come into your barracks room, they're gonna come check it out, sometimes in the morning, sometimes specific days that are designated as, barracks inspection days. Typically they don't go through like your drawers and everything like that, but they're gonna come and look through your rooms and maybe look inside your closet or whatever and see if you have things at least somewhat organized. Make sure you don't have like a pizza box that's been sitting there for the last several weeks or whatever from, your partying days from, a couple weekends back or whatever the case is. A lot of, dirty dishes laying in the thing that are growing mold, those kind of things. So a lot of it's cleanliness, a lot of it's just general living conditions and making sure that you're living well. Now, when you're in the field, it kind of goes back to kind of like those same kind of circumstances in basic training where you're probably inside of a tent in a lot of common situations and you're gonna have to get dressed in front of those other soldiers. So you're changing maybe from whatever you were sleeping in to get into your uniform or maybe whatever else it calls for. So there are gonna be some situations during like the field where you're gonna have to do that. And usually it is segregated between men and women in most cases. They usually at least will have some kind of like divider maybe between the men and women. That way they can, get changed, a little bit privately so that the men are getting changed with the other men and the women are getting changed with the other women and that kind of stuff. If you're in a specific type of field environment that has showers, well then you might have that certain case. Most field problems don't have showers and you have to use baby wipes and everything, but there's some cases like maybe NTC, sometimes they might have some shower trailers that occasionally work or don't work. In most common cases you don't even have showers though. Another big one, especially compared to the civilian side, is when doing a urinalysis, doing a drug test. On the civilian side, I've heard lots of stories of people that have their ways of, being able to get past a drug test because they got fake pee or whatever it is. But that's because on the civilian side, usually when you do drug tests, you go to a place that is authorized to do drug testing, maybe a hospital or something like that, some kind of clinic, and you just go inside the bathroom by yourself, pee in the cup, come back out, hand over your sample to the doctor, and then, they test that for drugs. Well, in the Army, it works quite a bit differently. When you do this in the Army, you have observers, and the observers have to watch you physically pee inside of the cup to make sure that you're not tampering with that sample. So that makes sure you're not using something like fake pee or somehow contaminating the sample to give a false result. So that means both male and female side, you have a male observer to observe the males and a female observer to observe the females, and they're supposed to physically watch you pee inside that cup. So when you go in the bathroom, you're holding that cup that you have for the sample over your shoulder so they can see it in place. You're walking into that bathroom, you're unscrewing it so they can see it, and they have to physically watch you take, your private parts out and pee into that cup. Now, sure, there are a lot of cases where, people don't want to sit there and, look at your junk while you're peeing into that cup. So they might just kind of stand at the back and kind of be there and kind of watch from a distance. Some people will take it a little bit more seriously and get, right up there and you're really up in there checking out what's going on kind of a thing. So it kind of depends on the individual, but technically by standards, they're supposed to physically be able to observe the urine coming out of your private parts and into this cup to make sure that you're not, having fake pee or tampering with that sample in some way. So just be ready for that. So when you do have to do urinalysis, which you do a lot of them a lot of times in the military, someone's gonna be watching you pee in that cup. The next one, kind of medical related as well, and that is doctor's appointments. On the civilian side, you have something maybe embarrassing that you have to go see the doctor for. You just tell your employer, hey, I'm taking a couple of hours of sick, or I'm taking a sick day or whatever because I have a doctor's appointment to go to. No questions get asked beyond that. Well, in the Army, not so much. Now, you may not need to necessarily share it with the entire platoon, but there's gonna be someone probably in your platoon, you're gonna have to let someone know, why you have to go to the doctors, why you need to go see the medics. They're gonna wanna know the specifics. So if it's something like, I don't know, you were having a crazy weekend and slept with someone that maybe you're a little suspicious of, or you got something going on because of it or whatever, you're gonna probably have to be a little bit upfront and tell someone, hey, I need to go to get an STD check, or I need to go do this, or whatever the case is. There's probably someone in the platoon. It might be like your first line supervisor, it might be your platoon sergeant, maybe your platoon leader, someone you trust. A lot of times there's at least someone in your leadership that needs to know why you're specifically needing to go see the medics, why you're specifically going to see a doctor for something. Now, they're not supposed to go and like spread that around, right? So if you trust, that squad leader, that platoon sergeant, whatever, and you have to go get an STD check or something like that, something you don't want to know, want all the other people in your platoon knowing about you, right? They're not supposed to be going and sharing that information. To say it doesn't happen, yeah, it might happen. You may have some corrupt individuals, some people that, do things they're not supposed to do, right? But technically, they're not supposed to share that information. It's supposed to be confidential between you and your leadership, but just be aware that, I guess they still could. It just depends on how trustworthy that leadership individual is, I guess. So another one as far as privacy that you're gonna have to disclose is marriage status. On the civilian side, you might be able to get away with a lot of employers just simply telling you're married or you're single or whatever, and they need to know that for tax purposes or whatever, but maybe they don't need to know any more information beyond that, depending on the employer, I guess. But on the Army side, you have to be pretty specific about a lot of things. You have to tell them if you're married or not. You have to tell them the name of that individual, the social security of that individual, the gender of that individual. So there's a lot of things you have to disclose. Maybe you're worried about being, discriminated against because you're a male who's married to another male, or a female married to another female, and you don't want to be discriminated against for that, and you're concerned about that. Well, you still have to disclose that to your leadership. For someone on the civilian side, they might be able to get away with not disclosing that, right? They can just simply say, yes, I'm married, but don't give any more details, beyond that. So the employer doesn't know if you're married to a male or a female or whatever the case is. But in the military, like I said, you have to be fully upfront with that because they need to know all this information for them, because that person's probably going to need an ID card. You're going to be getting paid your BAH for the basic housing allowance and everything else like that. And so they need all that information on who your spouse is. Also, a lot of times for security reasons, especially if you're someone who has a security clearance or is getting a security clearance, well, they need to know the people that you're living with. So they need to know everything about that individual as well. Now that even goes for, let's say, if you were to get divorced or you're having some kind of marriage problems. Those are things you also have to disclose with your leadership as well. You don't have to necessarily do that on the civilian side, but in the Army you do. On the civilian side, if maybe you're having some kind of marriage problems, maybe you're separating, or you're living separate from that individual to take a break from them or whatever, you don't have to necessarily disclose that with your civilian employer, but you're going to have to disclose that with your military leadership to let them know that, because you could be potentially a security risk, you could be a health risk, maybe they're worried about you maybe getting really depressed or committing suicide or something like that. So there's a lot of these things they want to know about those kind of things, especially if it comes down to divorce, because then that changes maybe your status of if you're qualified for basic housing allowance or in BAS. So you have to disclose who you're married to, who they are. If you get divorced, you have to disclose all that stuff, and even a lot of times marriage problems. Another really big different ones from the civilian side to the Army side is what you do with your free time. A lot of times your civilian employer, they don't care, right? They want you to show up to work, want you to show up and work on time, and do your job well. Well, the Army wants you to do that too, but they also want to know what you're doing when you're not at work. And examples of that is you're restricted to like a limited area as far as a mileage range, 250 miles within the base. So civilian employer, they don't care if you go on a weekend trip to Vegas or New York or to Florida or wherever the case might be. The Army does, because you're restricted in that 250 mile radius. So if you're going to go outside of that, you have to put in for a pass, and they want to know specifically where you're going to. That also goes for like leave. If you want to take vacation on the civilian side, you just simply put in for vacation. They usually don't care where you're going on vacation, what you're going to do on vacation. But in the Army, they do. You have a form you have to fill out when you take vacation in the Army or take leave, and in there they want to know the address of where you were going to. And then also if you're going to go outside the country, you have to get a specific briefing, and you have to let them know about that. And they have to do other classes with you and everything like that to make sure that you're conducting yourself appropriately when you're in another country. Civilian side, they don't care. You just put in for your vacation and take off and do whatever you got to do. But in the Army, you're gonna have to tell them where you're going, if it's in the United States, outside the United States, and if it's outside the United States, well, you got some extra stuff to do. Now, there's probably a few other things here and there that are privacy related that you have to give up on the Army side. These were, a handful of them that I wanted to kind of outline, some really big ones. If there's something that maybe I didn't mention in this video, you can, mention it down in the comment section to let other individuals know about certain things that you want to kind of point out as far as privacy things you have to kind of give up inside the Army. For those of you that may be kind of curious about some of the things I talked about, or maybe things you've heard about, well, leave some comments down below and I'll do my best to try to answer those. Maybe some of my viewers that are maybe either already in the Army or military or veterans themselves can maybe help me out and answer some of those as well. I'll try to help you out and try to answer your questions that you might have, so drop those down below. Now, if you liked this video, hit that thumbs up. Maybe even think about sharing the video with some other people that may enjoy it as well. Share the love, right? Check out some links down in the description for social media and all sorts of other stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.